Again, hello everybody. Welcome to the webinar, which is a follow-up to the workshop on food and economic development strategy as part of the Community Economic Development track at the annual conference in Denver a couple of weeks ago. My name is Kevin Kelly. I'm the Director for Community Economic Development here at the Partnership. My role is to encourage more community action agencies to take on economic development and housing projects as part of what they do. Today's presentation will provide information on how one of our members, North Coast Opportunities in Northern California, has decided to get into the food sector as a strategy for economic development. And one of the things they're doing is a food hub. I think they would have been in Denver making a presentation to us there, but due to the fires in Northern California, the executive director was not able to make it. In an attempt to get the information out to you, we've gone ahead and scheduled this webinar for today. Our speaker today will be Caroline Radici, who's the Mendo Lake Food Hub Manager. And now I'm going to hand it over to Caroline.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm happy to be here presenting to you guys. We had a really exciting time of this project. The Mendo Lake Food Hub has had many years of effort go into it, starting back with a feasibility study in 2011, where essentially North Coast Opportunities got the feedback from the community that they wanted to see a food hub. We live in a really rural area, and we have really very small agricultural producers, and distribution tends to be a huge issue. So you have a tiny farm way up boonies on the south coast of Mendocino. The drive to a nearest town where they're going to be going through a lot of produce is 2.5 hours on a windy dirt road. So delivery tends to be a huge issue. Getting the food out to the communities is a huge issue. So, and feasibility study to determine if it was realistic to do a food hub, to start one up, to kind of solve this issue of distribution. And they found some interesting results where even if we wanted to see this happen, there essentially wasn't enough supply to actually operate a food hub. A food hub is, by nature, a local produce distributor where we distribute produce from the small farms in our community. But to be able, you have to have a certain quantity of produce actually available to distribute. And at the beginning of this project is that there was not the quantity. So the steps for the project and development was get grant funding and outside support to help increase the specialty crop production skills and strengthen production, business, and food safety skills for the specialty crop producers that participate in the food hub. We've mainly been working with specialty crop funding from the CDFA over the course of this project. We're a produce distributor, the same way there are lots of other different kinds of produce distributors. Our specialty is local produce, but for our actual work that I do in the office every day and out in the field every day, a huge amount of it focuses on technical assistance to small farmers. Mendocino County, the agricultural producers in our area are traditionally centered on intoxicants. So it's mainly wine grape production, and then until last year when cannabis was legal, it was illicit cannabis production. At this point, California has legalized cannabis production. It still is federally illegal, which brings up a lot of complex issues as far as being a community action agency. But what we do is really focus on food producers. So we want people to be growing nutritious food for the people who live here in our community, and we want to kind of de-emphasize all of the intoxicants. There's plenty of support for that industry already, and they don't need our help to keep developing. The food producers in our area tend to be small farms, but really they are very, very small farms. I think the federal definition of a small farm is 50 acres and under. In our area, they are tiny farms. We're looking at 1/2 acre to 2 acres. So the beginning of the project was a challenge, taking these farms that traditionally were farmers market vendors, where they're actually homesteaders doing small family farms, doing enough for themselves and to take to farmers markets. Farms, not just to have to convince them to scale production, and then also to be excited about scale production, and then you have a lot of training you have to do to give them the skills that they're going to need to scale up production. Barriers that people traditionally face in our area are access to land, access to markets, and access to capital. Land access continues to be a major issue for farmers in our area. Most farmers are not going to own land. They will be renting, or they'll have some kind of arrangement worked out with a landowner, because the land is simply so expensive in Northern California that it really is not viable to pay for it with vegetable production alone. What we found with the technical assistance that we've done to enter wholesale markets instead of just doing farmers markets, there's a huge amount of training that we've brought outside experts, and then we've tried to do a lot of peer kind of brainstorming conversations where the community got to do it together. It's focused mainly on post-harvest handling, food safety, and coming up to the requirements for working with the Food Safety Organization Act. Also production efficiency and business planning. The farmers market farms were kind of people into this, I think, just for the joy of it and not necessarily with a real business plan. We tried to get people to start thinking about how they're going to make an actual viable business, how they were going to be able to continue doing this thing that they're passionate about for a long time, and not just have it be kind of a blink on the radar. What we're seeing in the early 2000s in the farmers market system is there's a huge surge of new farmers coming in, and it was all these people doing really wonderful things, great produce. They used to be very small. They were very passionate about it. But after a year or two, they kind of realized that it wasn't. It's a horrible job. Don't do it the right way. You're going to lose money. It's a very expensive hobby, essentially. So we try to start catching those people when they're in that early point of their farming career, and give them a lot of support and guidance, so that instead of just kind of entering and then exiting a few years later, they could actually stay in the business. We saw the big learning curve there is post-harvest handling for wholesale markets. So it's kind of ridiculous. We always joke about how much time we talk about don't forget to buy. You're going to need boxes for all this food that you grow. So half time that's gone into convincing people, don't forget you're going to need a box. And really ridiculous. It's amazing. A lot of small farmers can go through this whole process where you make a garden plan in the winter, you order your seeds, you start your seeds, you cultivate your field, you grow things, you harvest them, but then the bit that we've seen is remembering to have a box to put the produce in afterwards. That can be one of the hardest parts. But been kind of the inspiration for one of the biggest lessons that I'll touch on later, that with all of these really major food system-wide projects, I think expecting that the pace of change will be slow and being very patient with people along the way is kind of critical to the success of the project. You can't expect to be giving people information and have them absorb it immediately. It take a little bit of time, and you're going to have give people the information in multiple different ways before it really sinks in and they start implementing it on their farms. So to get out all this information, we've done workshops, we send out newsletters, we have different print materials we'll give people, we send out text reminders. So it's a whole set of reminders about how to do these things, and don't expect farms to kind of be able to implement it overnight. I think most farms took maybe 2 to 3 years to start really seeing changes happen. over with the kind of information we were giving them. It kind of happens at a glacial pace on a farm, so you can tell people a bunch of things that they could improve on or ways they could grow their business. It tends to be over the winter. They might pick a couple that really stick out to them and how they're going to change, and they might try them the next year. Only some of them are going to work correctly. Some of them they might not do the right way, or it might not be the right thing for their farm. So it kind of is in like year 3 you start really seeing people actually have some pretty substantial changes happening on their farms. Being said, I do think having changes happen under 5 years is exciting, totally a fine pace to be going at. And most of the farms that have implemented these practices would consider going back to how they used to do it. So now some of our success story farms they've got produce washing stations set up where instead of just having a situation where you harvest produce and then it just thrown in the back of a dirty pickup truck and goes to the farmer's market, there's really nice systems where people plan the flow of the produce from the field to the washing station, to their cold storage facility, to their delivery van, to the Food Hub cold storage node, and it's all out in a really thoughtful, intentional way that makes life easy, where you can actually be processing large amounts of produce, and that farmer is going to be more successful and have a larger paycheck. So though it's taken quite a while to implement, farmers are really happy with the changes. So some of the changes that we've seen over the course of this project since 2011, the specialty crop producers that we're working with are showing dramatic increased production, where with a new market, wholesale markets across North California, so now people can confidently grow way more produce than they used to grow. We've seen major increases in post-harvest handling skills. We've seen an increased number of crops for sale over a longer season. So instead of just having a kind of scattered availability of levers from the farmers market, now we see producers actually planning to grow, large amounts of salad mix over as long a season as they possibly can. And we've also seen increased capacity from farmers for business planning, where we have farmers who are actually making crop plans with what they're going to grow, the quantity that they're going to grow, the dollar value of what that's worth, what actual revenue projections are going to look like, to plan for a viable, profitable, successful business. So in this slide, you can also see some of the advances that we've made in packaging. On the left side, there's this Tequio Farm salad mix. Tequio Community Farm had been really successful selling their salad mix at the farmers market, and then they made some changes to offer it to wholesale markets, where they offered it in clamshells, packaged like a traditional salad mix that you'd get from a larger supplier. And it was a hit, so grocery stores started buying their packaged salad mix. Has a nice label. It stays fresh and it lasts for a really long time. We've gotten great feedback from grocery stores that last longer than the other salad mix options that they have. And then we'll also see small farms like Yokawa Roots Farm up in the other corner that they offer these clamshell pea shoots that are also really popular at grocery stores, and we get the same feedback that it lasts longer and is better quality than the other larger distributors' products. So out of this, while we've been working on increasing the production skills of all of the farmers in our community, we've been working on building a market for all this produce. The Mendo Food Hub is part of the California Food Hub Network, which includes 21 other food hubs and is coordinated out of UC Davis. And we have gotten the feedback that Mendocino County is really lucky that we have a generally really supportive community who doesn't need a lot of convincing for why they should buy local. So I think a lot of just inherent knowledge that's been passed down about, farm fresh apple is really delicious, and if you can get them, you should buy them. But it doesn't necessarily feel like we've had to do a huge amount of work compared to other areas. We did implement a Grown Local marketing campaign. So that's this card right here. So we offer these in different sizes, and it's used as a shelf identifier in the grocery store, where each farm has their own picture and their own card with a little description, and it goes next to the produce on the grocery store shelf so that customers know that that's local. So we can tell customers, go look for the red and gold Grown Local label, and that's how you'll know you're buying local. It's had mixed success, where it really depends on the grocery store. Our project isn't big enough and doesn't have the funding to actually have a merchandiser where we're putting up these things the way Pepsi or Coca-Cola might. So to rely on the grocery store produce department to actually put up our materials when we give them to them. So we'll ship them out a box of produce. We tuck our Grown cards in it and hope that they put them up. And we did do a lot of training at the beginning of the project on how to use them. But some grocery stores have waves in staffing where if they get really busy and someone is out sick, the cards might not get switched out properly, and maybe there's a wrong farmer card on the shelf next to someone's produce. It's not the same thing. But it does feel like a lot to manage for sometimes, but I think we've just been happy with a good, solid 75% success rate on implementing that, and we hope to continue improving on the future. One thing we've seen, though, is that instead of putting a lot of time and money into print materials, the food speaks for itself. Delicious, fresh food in season doesn't need a lot of money put into sales for it. You just want people to taste it. If they taste it, they're going to buy it. So we instead focused a lot more on grocery store demos, where we prepare a simple recipe that uses just a couple ingredients. We try and keep them really affordable, and have it be something that even someone who's maybe not super confident in the kitchen can still prepare. A lot of the recipes that we use were actually developed with a previous project that NCO did, the food prep, where we developed recipes using seasonal local produce. Invite a farmer to come in with us to the grocery store, and we'll have a Food Hub crew member that gives out samples of this recipe, and then the customers can produce. They can talk to the farmer who grew the produce. It can be more like a farmer's market experience where you're actually building a relationship with that farmer and getting to talk to them about the produce. And that part of the marketing effort has been hugely successful, where we'll see prolonged spikes in sales in the grocery stores, where if they're tracking by that crop, it's not just a spike in sales on the day of the demo, that it lasts for a long time afterwards. And department staff has told us that people will then start talking about that farmer by name and asking about them and asking about when their next crops are coming in. It's been a major success for the marketing part of this. I think the key, especially with food work, is that marketing should be built around authentic relationships and quality products. If you get into anything that's too slick and looks too expensive, or actually is too expensive, you're going to lose buy-in from all the people who are participating in the project. Really, when you're working with communities that tend to be quite low income, most of the farmers that we're working with are living at poverty level or under poverty level, so spending too much money on marketing materials is blatantly offensive to any of the farmers that are participating in the project. Really want to watch your budget on something like that. The Mendon Food Hub, because we are in a rural area, has a really diverse set of customers where we really try and say yes to anyone we can. Some food hubs are a little more specialized, where they pick one, but what we found in our area is you kind of just have to say yes to everything and do as much as you can to make ends meet. Opportunities does have a huge amount of time and effort that's been put into developing farm-to-school relationships. So we've had other funding that's helped do trainings for school food service staff to help them learn how to prepare fresh whole produce, because maybe some of the staff haven't even worked with it before. It's also helped get equipment for some of the kitchens where we have the right tools to be preparing large scale of the produce. So we work with a large number of school districts. That's kind of unique for our food hub. We serve all of Mendocino County, lots of Lake County, and then we've even stretched all the way over to Sacramento and Davis, and then had some requests down in the Bay Area that we're hoping to fill next year. We work with a large number of grocery stores. Our target grocery stores right now tend to be stores and kind of natural food stores. What we found is that there's a barrier getting the price points to match with local produce and large big box grocery stores, and most farms are not going to be able to compete on price to match the price that a large grocery store would need. So the best advice that we got from some other people when we were starting this is don't try and compete on price. Small farms are never going to be able to compete on price. You want to compete quality and consistency, but on price you're going to put yourself out of business. So we try and encourage farmers to drop their prices to meet those prices, because all we're going to do is create a frustrating situation for a farmer where they're actively taking a loss. And that's been an interesting situation where, consulting with farmers, we do have to be really careful not to be giving advice that could actually harm someone's business and cause them to lose money or potentially go out of business. Our main pattern of is made up of restaurants and caterers. We found that their price point matches pretty nicely with what farmers are looking for, and they really appreciate the unique and special varieties that a lot of farms grow around here. Probably the biggest key to our success right now as a rural food hub is cross-transacting with other food hubs. So we have a food hub to the east of us and then a food hub to the south of us. I'll just get here. And basically, this has been the solution to the issue of supply. Their universal issue when small food producers that there is really inconsistent supply of local food available. You'll get a customer who you'll convince to get on board with this project and they want to start buying local, but if you can't have a consistent supply, some weeks you have it and some weeks you don't, that customer invariably gets kind of frustrated and may not want to continue purchasing anymore. So pretty early on is recognize that surround food hubs were a little older than us and their farms had developed more than ours had, just because they had more time to be scaling up for these markets. So instead of telling a customer that we're out of a certain item, we just bring from a neighboring food hub. So we cross-transact the most regularly with Feed Sonoma. That's the Sonoma County Food Hub. We go down twice a week, and any gap that we have that we need filled, we'll purchase in produce from them. What it means is that if a producer here saturates our market and has so much produce that we've stocked every single produce department with watermelons and every single stall in the book is watermelons, it means that then we can send some down to a major metropolitan area without actually having to drive there and deliver there ourselves. So that's been a huge benefit, and I think is really critical. Developing those relationships for anyone in a rural area, you want to work with your neighbors as much as possible. Bring up the question of what the goal of your project is. If you're trying to have people buying local food, there are many descriptors these days to types of food. It's all of them, but there's so many different things you can do. So you can be local, you can buy organic, pesticide-free, there's sustainable, there's lots of new buzzwords like regenerative agriculture, things like that. And so I think you kind of have to pick which one is the most important to you. And we kind of targeted, actually, we want to be buying local and supporting farms that are right here in our community. But if there's a farm that's a similar size, it's a small farm in another community that's next door, that person is likely using similar growing practices and in their community in the same way that we want to see this happen here. And so we realize that it's a specific scale of food producer is really valuable, and it doesn't necessarily have to be someone that's within a number of miles from our office or something like that. And I think also the broader goal, increase access to nutritious food in the community, where, you know, if you get too hung up on where the apple was grown, it can make you get into the local food anxiety spiral where there's 100 reasons why one apple is better than the other, and you end up getting totally freaked out about an apple. But you should just eat apples. Eat apples is good for you. Eating a salad is good for you. I know we're getting that stuff from farms right here, but if it's from a farm a county over, we're still really happy that people are eating apples. So I think that's important for us to realize, and anyone else starting out a food project, I think it's important to really clarify what goals you're thinking about. So this is a map of our node distribution network. It's a little blurry, but one of the unique things about our food hub compared to other food hubs, instead of aggregating all in one central warehouse, we have dispersed nodes that aren't staffed. So essentially, insulated shipping containers that have a key on the door, them located around both counties so that one farm isn't having to drive a long distance. And so a farmer will get their pick list, they get their orders for the day, and then they harvest their orders depending on what they actually got. So it's all harvested fresh, and they drive to the nearest node and drop it off. And then our delivery truck goes around this loop and then to the farthest south area. And so instead of having one farmer drive a long way, once you start carpooling with everyone's produce, it becomes a viable project. What notes that have about doing this in a rural area is building realistic goals for the business of what it ever actually is going to be. I don't think that the food project is ever going to be an incredibly profitable business, and I think having it hit break even with a little cushion is all that we're really trying to get to. Our Farm Market Association here in Mendocino County, the goal is always just to hit break even every year. And I think that it's a similar concept for the food hub, where the goal is to have lots of farmers selling as much produce as they can. It's not necessarily for the food hub itself to be making a lot of money. We have to pay for itself. So that's in this process, because our current grant funding will end in March of 2019. Over this whole project, we've been kind of planning and hoping that we would transition to a grower cooperative. In the last year seemed like it was going to be viable because at first not enough farmers were really participating in the food hub, but as it got really big and a lot of farmers really started participating, we serve 60 farmers at this point. It seemed like all of a sudden it was going to be a reality. So we've been working with the California Centers for Cooperative Development, who will be assisting with the conversion into a grower co-op. We've investigated a lot of different business end models over the last 3 years with our Farmer Steering Committee to try and find what one was the right model for the future. It was a really challenging process to go through. if you imagine a farmer who can't read a financial statement from their own farm, attempting to read a financial statement for a whole food hub, and being able to maintain buying that farmer when you see their eyes glaze over and say like, "Oh, I want to sell produce, but this is this is way too much. I don't want to be involved in this." We did kind of get over that hump though, and got people feeling confident enough that they did really commit to seeing this continue. And CCD has been a fabulous asset to helping all of the farmers feel empowered that they are capable and they are skilled enough to take over this. We're planning on really dramatically changing the staffing structure. There will still be a food hub manager and have paid staff and a paid delivery person, but the farmers will be able to maintain ownership of the project and make decisions for themselves for how it's going to grow and progress in the future. We also have been putting a lot of energy into all of our sustainability planning to make sure that as the end of grant funding ends and staff transition could potentially happen, that we don't end up with that situation that can happen where staff have all the information in their own minds and all the relationships are built around those specific people. And so then if they leave, all of a sudden there's a huge gap in knowledge and it can be a huge learning curve for new people. Everything we do in the food hub for our whole crew is trying to be as transparent as possible, where we maintain a lot of records and we share them all with everyone, so that way any new people that come on board can look back through all of our old records and understand how all of the relationships got to where they are. Every time we make a sales call to anyone or we talk to a buyer or talk to a farmer, we take notes so we can track how the relationships developed, so that way if one person leaves, we won't be left high and dry because all the knowledge has left with them. So we've developed how-to guides for buyers, how-to guides for farmers, a really clear registering process for farmers and buyers, and we'll be launching a new website that kind of has all this information on it to summarize where the project's gotten to. We have a great part of this project that we're able to do some reflecting on critical lessons and really important beliefs that make a project like this successful. The one is equity. When you're trying to hit financial numbers, project like a food hub, it'd be tempting to only work with the largest producers because that's how you're going to hit your targets. So it could be tempting to focus on just a few big farms to try and reach financial viability. But where we really need the buy-in and participation of all of the people, like of all the farmers. We need them on board and we need them all participating in the project. So coming at this project with a view that all farms are important, no matter big or small they are, and they all deserve equal attention and access to the technical assistance they have and staff time and all of those different things has been critical. I have a background as a small farmer, and I was one of the before I had this position, I was one of the tiny farms that could often feel a little bit neglected, where the large farms are getting the spotlight because they sell so much. But having the buy-in of a large group is what makes a project successful. I think identifying shared goals is really important with a large food systems project like this, where you have to listen to what the people you're working for actually want you to do and not try and force them to do what you think is right for them. So there's an economic argument for why working with a food hub and wholesaling is like quote unquote than going to a farmer's market. And it really turned people off at the beginning of the project, where there were whole discussions about why gas money is so expensive, driving so far to get to farmer's market, your time that you're not factoring in to do a farmer's market, all of your expenses like buying your canopy and your tables and all of the things you need for farmer's market, and then your stall fees, it's laundry of why farmers market is not a good idea and why you should wholesale instead. And it set the project back a lot at the beginning, where it aided people who care about the farmers market and love the farmers market, and they are not doing it because they're trying to make money. They're doing it because they care deeply about going. So I think it's critical to identify what are shared goals. And we've gotten to a point now with this project that the shared goals are that we want our community to be saturated with the most nutritious, delicious, healthy food, and we want to support small family farms and see them be successful and whatever that means for them. So it's less about economics and more about ideals. I think being incredibly patient is key, where you can't be frustrated if you see change taking a really long time to happen. And especially at the beginning of the process, people are going to be fighting it and talking about all the reasons that it's not a good idea. And you have to just listen to them and be ready to hear negative feedback, and then kind of adjust accordingly. And the biggest things that we're seeing right now that I advise other people on is slow growth. We've been encouraging farms to scale up, and the food itself has been scaling up. It's exciting to work on a successful project where your annual revenue is sometimes doubling from one year to the next. What we're seeing is it's imperative to be very cautious, and that it's not actually helpful for a business to grow that fast. There are too many new things to deal with every year, and it can be incredibly taxing on the staff, where you can cause burnout both in the farms and in the Food Hub project. It just is too much. So I think working with advisors who are really skilled on identifying good benchmarks for growth, for whether it's a food business or any business, is key. And that growing fast is exciting, but take your time and don't rush, because slow growth is healthy. You want to really build your project at a rate that people will be okay with building it, and not at a rate that's terrifying, where all of a sudden everyone's working twice as much as they meant to be working, and people are, starting to break their backs and just start getting burned out. So it is great to be at the point of the project that we can identify some of these lessons, because I think really key to success when you're working on really large-scale food system-wide project. Exciting partners we've worked with on this project. One of the unique ones that doesn't exist in a lot of other communities is called the Good Farm Fund. It's actually a fiscally sponsored project of North Coast Opportunities. And it's a completely grassroots-driven effort that is all made up of volunteers, where it's a mix of farmers, chefs, food systems advocates, people who care about local food. And what they do is they have farm-to-table dinners and fundraisers, and they provided capacity-building infrastructure grants. They're micro grants, $5,000 and under, directly to farms. So while we, Community Action Agency, can apply for grant funding from various government agencies to build this infrastructure, farm doesn't have that same option, but this has solved that. So, for instance, one farm that started selling a lot on the Food Hub had no cold storage facility on their farm. And when you're early in your growth process and you're a really new business, there's not $10,000 sitting around to invest in a cold storage building. Kale, like selling bunches of kale, simply is not going to make that much of a profit for someone who's working under poverty level. So Good Farm Fund came in and provided all these infrastructure grants directly out to farms, and they've given out, I think, $70,000 of grants to 50 farms at this point, and it's all for critical infrastructure like cold storage, seed extension, things like delivery vans, all the little things that a farm needs to be successful. I think it's a really wonderful project, and it's a replicable template that could be started in other communities very easily. So hopefully we'll see that spread in other areas. Have another fiscally sponsored project of NCO, the School School of Adaptive Agriculture that's in technical assistance. It's technical assistance to farmers in the community, and they've been very valuable as well. So the thing to emphasize is really just the value of people with all of this, and that you need buy-in from a lot of people to make a big project like this work, and that the most important part of all of it is relationships and your team. And so anything you can do to make that happen is probably the most important part. At this point, I'd love to open up for questions. If anyone has any questions about any of this, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, I don't see any as of yet, but please answer them. I've got a couple here. Caroline myself. How did your community action agency make the decision to get into this food sector to begin with?
Well, that they'd always identified it as an area that in a community, it tends to be a really great unifier where regardless of income level, education, or those other factors, we all have to eat every day, and localization of the food system is a really good project to get into. So there are different benefits where the economic benefits of food system localization, where most communities bring in food mainly from outside of their area. And if you talk about trying to shift, Mendocino County, we were buying about 2% of our food locally. And if you can get that number closer to 10%, you're looking at millions of dollars that's then staying in the community instead of leaving the community. There's all the public health benefits of local food, where local food is very nutritious. If you're working with, especially what we do, where it's people who grow fresh produce, you're betting on all the people who eat that because it's healthy. It's the best food for you to be eating. The environmental impacts of it, that small farms like we work with tend to be using really excellent farming practices, whether they're certified organic or they're not actually certified. They're taking care of the area where we live to try and maintain it for future generations. They're taking care of our watersheds. They're using pesticides. They're trying to really make our community better than they found it. So it seems like it's a great unifier that whether you're a Republican or you're a Democrat or any shade of the spectrum, everyone can really get behind food.
Question, Kelsey Cancer. Are you planning to make the sustainability materials public so other communities could replicate your successes and build off your lessons learned?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think, absolutely. We're planning on, as we get them refined, sharing them out as broadly as we possibly can. A part of our success has been working with the California Food Hub Network, because they try and share a lot of lessons learned among individual food hubs, and I definitely believe it's incredibly valuable, not for all of us, not to be making the same mistakes, and to be able to just learn from what other people have already worked on. So out of what we have as far as the how-tos, farmer how-tos, all those kind of things we'll be sharing. And one of the most valuable templates that we have that's already been shared, that we try and share fairly early, is a food growing contract template that we developed with a farm to school program several years ago, where some of farm to school successes have been based off of this forward growing contract process, where we found that food service directors at schools are so busy because they have so many kids to feed that they could be placing orders every single week and trying to figure out every single week with us. What they really needed to do is just figure it out before the school year started, where they give us the order for what they're going to want, and then we work with the farmer to go ahead and get that crop grown for them. So we have a straightforward template that you can customize based on the buyer and the farmer and the crop, and that's something that's really easy to share and use in different kinds of places. Happy to email you those materials if you want to share them out with more people.
Yeah, that'd be fine. I view that. Just reminds me that the webinar is not the end. I am going to be sending out to everybody who attended the tour or the workshop kind of a list of resources, a little thumbnail, profile some other groups that are doing work in the food area that are community action agencies, but we're not on the webinar, and some funding sources from some of the different government programs and publications and things like that. So there'll be more coming out to everybody in email. So I'll be happy to send what you send to me as well.
Great.
Fine.
Great.
I did have one other question here. Hold on a second. I guess getting to a little bit practical perspective here, what advice would you have for people who are interested in this? What are the first steps that you would need to do to get going?
To get going in food systems work in general?
Yeah.
I would advise find the best forum in your community to talk to people who are active in systems currently. So whether that's a farmers market association or North Coast Opportunities happened to have we've been hosting for 6 years at this point the North Coast Farmers Convergence, where it's kind of like a mini conference that's really cheap that farmers can do, and that's a really great forum where we can kind of ask people questions and see what they would like to do and how they would like to see things develop. That's been a great forum for us. If you have policy council, that's a good place to ask. I think the key is just trying to ask people who are doing work already what their ideas are and go from there.
Thanks. And Kelsey wrote a thing. Thank you. Wonderful. Any other questions? If anybody else has any, put them in here promptly so we can ask the speaker. I don't think anything else. Carol, I just want to thank you for agreeing to do this. I know you guys are still recuperating from there. It's been taking place not long ago out there in Northern California again this year, and this was not the best timing, I think, from the standpoint. But we appreciate your willingness to come on and talk, and I will send this out to everybody, and to those who weren't able to make it, who did attend, they will get a copy of the recording, so additional people will be able to hear what you had to say as well.
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, that concludes things for today. Thanks to everybody who's on the phone, and thanks again to Caroline.